Hello, everybody. Welcome to our webinar on helping children heal from stress and trauma. My name is Dr. Blaise Ryan, founder of Parent Learning Club and author of Democratic Parenting. So what I recommend for you to get the most out of this webinar is to have a piece of paper and a pen ready, because this webinar is meant to be interactive. So if you have a piece of paper and a pen, we'll be able to go right through and get the most out of this webinar. So what you're going to learn today is the root cause of abnormal childhood behavior patterns. We'll also talk about what is childhood stress disorder. We'll talk about the 4 causes of childhood stress and trauma and 8 specific methods on how to help children heal through stress and trauma. We'll also talk about how parents and teachers and doctors commonly misdiagnose childhood stress disorder as ADHD, Asperger's, or even autism spectrum disorder. We'll also briefly discuss some of the negative side effects of Ritalin and other psychiatric drugs that can actually backfire with some children. So who am I? What makes me an expert on child behavior? Why should you even listen to me? Well, my name is Dr. Blaise Ryan. I'm a doctor of traditional Chinese medicine. That means that I treat the root cause of disease, not just the symptoms. And when I became a father myself, my training in Chinese medicine led me to question the standard approaches to parenting, from the old school authoritarian do it my way or the highway approach to the modern day permissiveness or doormat parenting approach. And I thought to myself, might there not be a better way, a less stressful way that's easier for both child and parent? And so my research led me to found Child Brain Health and eventually ParentLearningClub.com, which has become a large online education resource for parents all around the world. And I culminated all my research into a book called Democratic Parenting. And I'm also the first one to define childhood stress disorder, and more importantly, and to provide a practical solution to resolve it that doesn't involve medication or drugs. So my whole approach to whether it's medicine or parenting or solving any type of problem is to go after the root cause. I call this root cause analysis, because if we don't address the root cause of any issue, then we might create like a temporary improvement in what's going on, but we're not going to create a permanent, lasting, and sustainable change for the better that we want to achieve. So in order to do that, we have to go after the root cause. And so the analogy I use for this is to talk about the roots and the fruits. So if we have a tree and we have fruits on our tree, these fruits represent the symptoms that we see with the problem, whether it's a health problem, the symptoms we have, or the behaviors that children or even anyone will manifest, or any types of problems that come up. Also, the results that we get in our life from any type of endeavor will be caused by the roots. And the roots are the causes behind these results. They're the reasons behind the behaviors. They're the motivations also behind these behaviors. And so, imagine if you had a tree, an apple tree, and your apple tree was bearing a rotten fruit. All the fruits that were coming up were rotten. And so you talked to your neighbor about this, and you told him about this problem you're having, that your apple tree is just producing all these rotten fruits. And the neighbor said, well, that's easy to fix. All you have to do is go to the supermarket. They have a sale now on these apples, and they're beautiful and shiny and red. Just buy a bag of those, bring them back home, and then take off all the rotten ones and just tape on all the fresh, shiny, waxy ones from the store. And then you'll have a tree of beautiful, shiny red apples. Well, this advice sounds crazy, doesn't it? It sounds crazy because it doesn't address the root cause. We just gloss over the problem, and people won't see the problem if they don't look closely. But just by looking a little bit closer, or by waiting a little bit longer, these fruit will start to decay as well, because they can't possibly last. And that's the same thing with how a lot of people approach child behaviors that are really hard to handle. So the difficult behaviors that we have, like ADHD symptoms, or defiance, or aggression, or just back talk, lying, any type of these types of rotten fruit behavior, we could call them, If we use like a punishment or bribes to try and just address the behavior in itself, if we just try and fix the problem on the fruit level, then eventually those problems are going to resurface because we just create a momentary distraction or a change on the superficial aspect, but we didn't address the roots. So this is where the webinar is going to start to get a little bit more interactive. What I want you to do is to take that piece of paper and your pen, and if you're listening to the recording at home, to just pause this the webinar right now and to write this down, because it's really the only way that you're going to get the most value out of this webinar is to engage and to interact and to write this down. So write down on your piece of paper your fruit list. Your fruit list are the things, the problems, the behaviors that you're seeing with your child or in your family, the issues that you would like to improve. So just take a moment right now and write down your fruit list. And if you're on the live webinar, please share any of these that you come up with. There's a little chat box on the webinar box there, and just type in any of the problems, the misbehaviors that you're dealing with, the fruits that you want to adjust. So just take a moment and either share those or write those down, please. Okay, we have some coming in for defiance, not listening, nagging, hitting siblings, poor focus at school, disruptive, these types of behaviors. These are all on the fruit level, different behaviors that we're dealing with. So next we want to look at what the root cause to all these fruits is. So what is the root underneath that? So we have 3 reasons for misbehavior. And if you have my book, Democratic Parenting, this is the foundation of the whole book. And it's really how we approach any type of behavioral problem with children, is to look at these 3 reasons and to basically figure out which one of these or which combination of these is really behind the behavior. And then when we can figure out what they are, then we can address those reasons and fix the behavior on a permanent, real transformational level. So the first one that we look at are legitimate unmet needs. So unmet needs, let's take a look at that. What do children actually need, right? So take another moment here and write down on your piece of paper and share with us on the webinar what you think children need. So please share your thoughts either on this webinar or just write them down on your piece of paper. If you're listening to the recording, pause it again and just take a minute or so just to jot down the first things that come to you. So we have love, attention, affection, positive encouragement, right? All of these are different types of needs. Great, good stuff. So I've identified in my research 15 legitimate needs, and these 15 needs are on 3 different levels, right? So we have the physical well-being, the actual body, the physical health, vitality. Then we have our social connection, how we interact with people socially, how connected we feel with people in our social environment, and our ability to communicate with them. And then we have our psychological or mental well-being, okay? So on these 3 levels, there are 15 legitimate needs that I've identified through doing a lot of research into a lot of different fields of psychology. And I'm not going to go into those right now because those require an entirely a whole webinar in and of itself to go deep into them. But it's important for us to consider what needs might be at play when a child starts to behave in challenging ways, okay? And the next one, the next reason for misbehavior are role models, okay? Children model the world around them. That's how they learn. That's how they grow. That's how they learn how to walk and talk and relate to people in their lives. That's how they learn to communicate. That's how they learn how to respond to challenges or to respond to problems or even to respond to stress is through the models that they've had in their lives. And there are 6 types of role models that will influence a child. We have the parents, which are obviously the primary role model. Then we have siblings and other family, right? So these 2 types of role models kind of make up our inner circle, and these have the largest influence in a child's development and their character. Next, we have peers and friends, and these are outside the home that start to influence children, and other adults in their environment, in their community, teachers in their schools, those types of things. And then next, we go beyond our social interactions, and we get a little bit more into characters in books and stories and television and other media, where children can be influenced by the behavior and the character and the personalities and the language used by these models in these various types of external media. And then also we have toys, right? Toys are things that children play with, and specifically I'm referring to toys that embody the character of humans, right? Like Barbies for girls, or little play guys and stuff for boys that are often quite violent. Actually, most boys will, if you go through the toy aisle in the store, you'll see that the boys' toys are very focused on violent and aggressive type of behavior, and that's what they're showing. A lot of them have guns or weapons, and so obviously this will influence a boy, because if all they're playing with are violent or aggressive focused toys, then that's of course going to affect their deep psychological makeup, because childhood is the foundation of our psychological makeup. It's where we start to form our worldview, from which we then start to respond to the world based upon that worldview. Okay, all right. And the next reason for misbehavior, we just talked about the first two. The first one is legitimate unmet needs, and then role models, and the final one is stress. All right, so we're talking about good stress and bad stress. So good stress, like I said, is a type of stress that really pushes us and inspires us and moves us to improve ourselves and to grow and expand, okay? And then there's bad stress. Now, bad stress, we all know what it feels like, right? It's pressure that weighs us down. It's tension that gives us a short fuse. It's these feelings of overwhelm and anxiety, or even doom. So what stresses you out? Okay, what are some of the things that creates bad or difficult stress for you? And more importantly, how do these things make you feel? So go ahead and share some of your experiences about the things that stress you out, or just take a moment now if you're watching this at home and just pause this recording and write down some of the things that stress you out and how the stress makes you feel. And this is a very important thing to do, because this will help to bring increased awareness around the whole experience of stress and help you understand what your child's going through better. So just take a moment to do that right now. And if you're on the live webinar, feel free to share your experience with us about things that stress you out. Okay, so some people talk about getting into fights with their children or with their spouses, pressure at work, fast-paced life, too much going on. Those are different things that can definitely stress us out. Excellent. So now, how do these things affect your thinking, your productivity, your communication, and your ability to relate harmoniously with others? So just take a moment and think about that. How do these things affect that? How does the stress, when you feel overwhelmed or panicky or almost like this type of anxiety, how does it affect your productivity and your communication? Next, what do you do to de-stress, to relax, to cope, to rejuvenate, to heal, to recover, and find your balance and that good feeling inside that everything's all right and everything's good? So what do you do in order to rejuvenate, to de-stress? Again, pause this recording, take a moment, and just write down some of the things that you do. Could be exercise, laughing with friends. Okay, great. Now, next, how do children get stressed? What might stress a child out? How does a stressed child act? And also, I want you to remember sometimes when your child is stressed. So also just take a moment now. Again, pause this recording, or if you're on the webinar, write down on your piece of paper some time that you remember when your child is getting stressed. So how did you react when this happened? So when your child was stressed, how did you react? How did you respond to them being stressed? Again, take a moment, pause the recording, and write down how you reacted to your child when they got stressed and acted in such a way. Okay, now let's go into trauma, okay, because this webinar is about helping children heal from stress and trauma. So trauma is, we're going to talk about the actual, the medical kind of definition, because, you know, with a lot of people being diagnosed with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, a lot more people are aware of the psychological effects of trauma. So there's a very specific, I guess you could say, diagnosis or definition of trauma. So trauma is the experiencing, the witnessing, or the confronting of threatened death, serious injury, threat to physical integrity of self or others, and the response involving intense fear, helplessness, or horror. Okay? So here we have the official definition of trauma. It has to have these two aspects. Okay? First, it has to either be the experiencing, witnessing, or the confronting. Threatened death, not actual death, but even just the threat of a death, serious injury, or the threat to the physical integrity of the self or another. And so in order to be traumatized, you have to experience or witness one of these three things, and you have to respond with intense fear, helplessness, or horror, and that will give you the actual definition of trauma. Then you could say someone has been traumatized through this experience. Okay, so the thing about the trauma, or whether it's an intense trauma like this, or stress that is prolonged or intense, it will cause the fight or flight response. Now, this is an instinctual response to trauma. Okay, we have a fight for survival, or we flee for survival. Okay, so we've had this, this is part of our kind of amygdala aspect of our brain, which is often referred to as our lizard brain, which is more the survival, physical aspects of ourselves. The instinctual parts doesn't involve higher thinking or clear judgment. It's very instinctual, very reactive. Okay, and it's meant to help keep us alive, especially when we're living in times where there are saber-toothed tigers and other beasts that would hunt us. So if we're confronted by one of these, a saber-toothed tiger, then we would get a blast of hormonal hormones in the body that would give us increased energy to fight for our survival, it would give us strength to fight, or to flee, to run really fast to save ourselves from being eaten. Okay, so we still have this instinct today, and it comes up whenever we are faced with something traumatic, because again, this is a response to survival. So if we're feeling like we're being our survival is being threatened, it will come up. Or even if we perceive that someone else, just like in our definition of trauma, when we witness threatened death, that can also cause the fight or flight response to come up. So it's a prehistoric response, okay? And it's still active today. Now, with the fight aspect of the response, prehistorically, we would get aggressive and combative. But nowadays, what we would do is completely different, because we can't always fight, you know, being responsible adults, and even though we might feel stressed or really upset at times, we can't punch someone out, and that's just not the way that we want to move forward and evolve as a race, right? And the prehistoric response to the flight aspect was obviously running and fleeing. But in modern times, you know, what can happen then is that people don't, you know, might not physically fight, but they'll respond more with anger, or they'll be more argumentative, or they might explode, or get really upset, or may even be irritable. And we can see, especially with children who will hit, you know, and be aggressive, that they're still responding more from the part of us that is not being holding ourselves back because of our social mores and our responsibilities. As we grow into adults, we learn not to kick and to bite and to pinch or to hit people when we're upset, or when we're the fight or flight response gets triggered. so we suppress that and we might just get angry or irritable or frustrated, okay? And the same thing with the modern response to the flight instinct, because we can't always run. It's more around different types of escapisms. So that might be social withdrawal, or different types of substance abuse that can happen with adults, or television viewing, video game playing, these types of things that even children can kind of get involved with. Different control patterns are also ways to kind of focus the energy that we get from this flight response to stress or to trauma. Okay, so the hormonal effects to stress is we have there's two basic main hormones that get released when we get stressed, when we feel traumatized or just this ongoing stress. And the first one is cortisol. So one thing you need to know about cortisol is that excessive amounts of it are toxic to the brain, and that will result in impaired learning and memory. Okay, so this is really important for us to pay attention to, especially when children are having a hard time with learning things, with memorizing things in school, with concentrating and paying attention. Okay, is we have to look at whether or not the child has an excessive amount of stress hormones in their body from either an intense stressful incident or long-term sustained stress that can build and cause this. And we'll get into the causes of stress shortly. And also cortisol increases blood sugar, all right? And so this is another thing we want to look at with children, more and more children being diagnosed with diabetes. A lot of it, of course, is due to poor diets and all the sugar that's now in food. But also we have to understand that the hormone cortisol, if children are stressed, it's also going to increase their blood sugar. So it acts like a vicious cycle when we compound that with a sugary diet. It also weakens the immune system, and this is something I see a lot. A lot more children are being diagnosed with various allergies, whether it's environmental allergies or food allergies or food sensitivities or asthma. These are different ways the immune system can be weakened. And again, cortisol, the main stress hormone, too much of it in the body can be a big factor in this. And reduce metabolism of fat, protein, and carbs. And again, we see another almost an epidemic amongst children, especially in America and the first world countries, of childhood obesity, which is becoming a huge issue. So again, with a child who's putting on weight, we want to look at whether or not stress might be a big factor in their life, okay? Because not only can emotional binge eating be a way that a child escapes from the feelings of stress and handles and copes with their stress, but the stress hormone of cortisol alone will also cause the decreased metabolism of fat. And that's another reason why a lot of adults actually can't lose weight as well, because many adults are running 24/7 on these stress hormones and this adrenaline from just over-busy and overburdened lives, which many people lead nowadays. It also reduces bone formation. So that's a really important one when we're looking at our child's long-term health and growth. So these are just different ways that cortisol affects our body. And this, again, is a main hormone released whenever anyone is stressed. Okay. The other main stress hormone is neuroepinephrine, also known as adrenaline. Okay. Now, this affects attention and our ability to respond. But typically, it's kind of like it's not long-term, a stamina level of response and attention. It's more short-term, focused, almost tunnel vision type of attention, and the response is much more reactive. And again, because this attention and response is focused more on the survival of our being. So we have an increased attention of our environment, but also of the kind of a tunnel vision of our mode to escape if we want to flee or to fight whatever we're being attacked by with this intense attention. And now one thing that should be mentioned here too is that the ADHD medications do act to increase levels of neuroepinephrine. So the adrenaline, so we're actually just compounding the stress hormones inside the body by giving them these types of drugs. And the reason it does that is because a lot of the ADHD medications are crystal methamphetamine based, which are used. They stimulate the release of adrenaline in the adrenal glands. But another big problem with this also too is then that these drugs will affect our body's ability to naturally release the appropriate amount of adrenaline, neuroepinephrine, just to keep us going. So that's one of the downfalls of using some of these types of medications. It really does mess with our chemical makeup long term. Now let's talk about the psychology of childhood stress. Why do children actually get stressed, and what are some of the things which stress them out? Okay, because a lot of the times a child is feeling stressed and responding in different ways and showing these types of really difficult behaviors that the parents have a hard time dealing with and they don't know how to respond to. But the parents don't understand that the child would be stressed, because when they look at the child's upbringing and their childhood, they feel that they're meeting a lot of their needs, and that there's actually no need for the child to be stressed. But what we need to do is to look at life and the world from the lens of a child, and specifically what it means to be a human child. Now, human children are different than the babies and offspring of most animals, mostly because they're dependent on us for a very long time, where most other animals and creatures on this planet attain their independence and their ability to survive by themselves much earlier on. Okay, but for adults, it takes years and years and years that children are dependent on the adults. So children know this instinctively, that their survival is dependent upon the adults around them. Now, it's dependent specifically on their connection to the adults around them, because if the adult isn't connected to them, they might just leave them behind and they might not survive, right? Now, of course, that's not going to happen in modern times, but we can go back a few thousand years when we lived in much more primitive environments, where maybe there's lots of children that were being born, and we weren't always, and it was very common too for many children to die quite young as well. Now, whenever a child's sense of connection is threatened, whether it's a real threat or whether it's just a perceived threat on the child's side, they will feel stress. Okay, whenever they sense that. Now, it's the disconnection is the big thing to consider here. So things that create this disconnection, which a lot of parents aren't always aware of or don't consider, is criticism, right? Because the child feels criticized and therefore disconnected. Isolation, which is a very obvious sense of disconnection, because they're being physically isolated away from everyone else, physically disconnected. And any type of confusion as well, whether they hear something or they see something which they don't understand. That immediately makes them aware of how disconnected they are from the world around them, because they're confused. They don't see the connection between what's themselves and what they're experiencing or seeing. So these are some subtle ways that really cause children to feel stressed based on the disconnection that comes from these, which are important for parents to consider when they're helping children through difficult behaviors. Now, let's look at the 4 causes of childhood stress. Now, this is, again, we're coming here to the root causes of childhood stress disorder. And there's 4 different, basically, types or causes. First, we have aggressive stress. Now, aggressive stress is tangible pain or the fear of pain. So this is actual hitting or violence, spanking or shaking. It could also be yelling or scolding, okay, or abuse, whether it's physical, emotional, or sexual. These are all different types of aggressive stress where there's an actual physical pain, or the fear of pain, like being scolded or yelled at, okay? Now, this causes aggressive stress, and also different types of trauma as well can cause this: accidents, physical pain, and that kind of thing. Threats and punishments, okay? These are more type of aggressive stress that the children can experience. Next, we have passive stress. Now, passive stress is really the pressure of unmet needs. Okay, we talked earlier about the 3 reasons for misbehavior. One of them was the legitimate unmet needs. So when these legitimate unmet needs go on for either a long time or when really important ones just go unmet for a short time, a pressure will build, and this pressure will lead to the stress, okay? So over or under stimulation, poor health, no clear limits or boundaries or directions, or a broken sense of connection, prolonged lack of affection or attention, these are all different types of passive stress, okay? Next, we have situational stress. Situational stress are challenges beyond your control, okay? Life changes or situations that are really nobody's fault, like natural disasters, divorce, or parental separation, hearing about wars or disasters on the news or seeing images or reading about it on the paper, diseases, death, or illness of a family member or even a pet. These can all cause a type of stress for a child, which is what we call a situational type of stress. Moving, going to a new school, right? Changing houses, change of schools. These are all different types of situational stress which do affect a child. Finally, we have birth stress. Okay, that's the fourth type or cause of childhood stress. Now, these are problems that occur before, during, or after birth, like fetal or maternal distress, prolonged labor, traumatic birth, early infancy trauma, medication, surgery, mechanical birthing aids, or birth defects, okay? These are different types of birth stress. So here we have the four causes of childhood stress, all the different ways that children can get stressed in their lives, right? We have the aggressive, very obvious type of stress, like if they get pushed or hit or by a bully at school, okay, that would cause the child to be stressed, and that's the aggressive type of stress. Passive stress, right? Like if a child is being just overstimulated all the time by an excessively busy schedule. They have no downtime in their schedule, and from morning till night, they're just running and going from one thing to another. Maybe they have also excessive academic pressure on them to perform well. So that might be a type of passive stress as well that can build on them. Then situational stress, like if they move, if their parents go through a divorce and they move homes, they move schools, they move cities, those can cause a type of situational stress. And birth stress, things that happen before, during, or after birth that can cause physical or emotional stress for either the child or even the mother as well, which can therefore affect the child because the child, the baby, at that point is still so closely connected to the mother. So what is childhood stress disorder? So let's first look at the word disorder. A disorder is a disturbance, right? A lack of order, disorder. It's a deviation from the normal, a manifestation of off-track symptoms or behavior. Okay, so examples of childhood stress disorders are Asperger's type of symptoms, attachment disorder. These are different types of childhood disorders that are listed in the DSM-4 and 5, which is the main psychiatric book that psychiatric doctors use to diagnose children of different type of psych disorders. So we have attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder, autism spectrum disorder, conduct disorder, oppositional defiant disorder, known also as ODD, separation anxiety disorder, reading disorders, expressive language disorders, right? We have difficulty reading and expressing, difficulty separating from another one, difficulty cooperating and communicating, difficulty in just conducting themselves normally, right? Paying attention and socially interacting. All these different types of disorders. So what about childhood stress disorder? So I'm the first one to describe childhood stress disorder, and what it is, it's a broad diagnosis for child behavior disturbances that are caused by severe or sustained stress or trauma. Okay, so it's a broad diagnosis for a variety of child behavior disturbances. And why I've isolated it is because it's something I see again and again when I work with parents all around the world. Literally thousands of them send me emails all the time, and they talk about all their different the fruits, the behaviors the behavior disturbances that they're experiencing with children, their own children, or oftentimes with teachers, or even other type of therapists will contact me with cases that they're having a hard time with, and they'll describe those cases. And then when they share a little bit about their lives and the child's life, then we can usually see pretty easily that the child has gone through one of those 4 types of stress, or even a few of those types of 4 types of stress, whether it's aggressive stress, passive stress, situational stress, or birth stress, and the and is very important here, they haven't had a chance to properly process it and heal from it. Because stress is a normal part of life. We can't escape bad stress coming to us, right? Life will throw us curveballs all the time, and we can't always be ready for it, and sometimes it's hard to deal with those. So stress comes to us. Stress is a natural part of life. The important part is to learn how to process it, to heal from it, so that we can get rid of the stress hormones, which can actually literally hold our health and our bodies and our mental capacities captive by the sheer effects of those hormones on our brain cells and our entire nervous system. So we want to heal from that. So symptoms of childhood stress disorder. These, again, are some of the things that I hear all the time, or that I see in my clinic. So distracted, forgetful, hyperactive, impatient, difficulty concentrating or paying attention. Okay, so here we see these are a lot of ADD and ADHD type symptoms. Defiance, angry, easily annoyed or upset. There's like oppositional defiant disorder. Frequent temper tantrums, angry outbursts. Okay, these types of things. Needy, clingy, demanding, whiny, shy, timid. Emotionally withdrawn and uncommunicative. Okay, so that or poor spatial analysis, awareness, clumsy, prone to accidents. Okay, some of these symptoms here are often associated with autism spectrum disorders or Asperger's disorders as well. Okay, which sometimes, not all the time, but some children who are diagnosed with that are actually have just so much stress in their lives that they're unable to, they're reacting to that stress, which is giving them the symptoms of these Asperger's or autism. Other symptoms are bedwetting and nightmares, sleep problems, or night panics, tummy aches, abdominal pains with no apparent physical cause, right? So a child who has abdominal pains or a sore tummy aches, but then we take them to the doctor and there's no apparent physical cause, that can definitely be a cause of stress. Bullying, aggression, violence, hitting, kicking, biting, or pinching in children. Another response, that's the fight drive that we talked about in the fight or flight response. Power struggles, arguments, backtalk, lying, right? Control patterns, repetitive movements, obsessive habits, ritualistic types of behaviors, often associated again with autism type behaviors. They avoid eye contact or are unresponsive to social engagement. They refuse to share, or they have a reduced empathy. Okay, so all of these symptoms we can see are the natural and more modern flight response to trauma or stress, right? They're running away from engagement and social interaction because they're having some stress they're having a hard time dealing with, okay? So now those are the types of symptoms that we see when a child is stressed and having childhood stress disorder. So now how do we heal from that? How do we heal from stress and trauma? Now the last thing I want to do is to make this diagnosis of childhood stress disorder and to give the child, tell the child or the parent that they need to take some type of medication or pay for some expensive therapy or see a person that's really hard for them to see, like a therapist or a counselor, or send them to boot camp or anything like that, right? Because what I want to do is to help empower parents to take their family, to take control over the relationships in their family and to really help the child return to a place of love and empathy, of connection, of clear thinking and good judgment. And the way to do that is to heal from the stress and trauma, right? To actually heal. So what I'm going to do is to go over some practical and natural and easy ways that we can help children heal from stress. And this is called like the inborn repair kit, our natural inborn repair kit for healing from stress. And I got that term from Isaac Romano, one of my mentors for democratic parenting. He called these your inborn repair kits for stress. The first one is talking about your problems, right? And we can see that in modern therapy, this is used very much to help people just to vent and reduce some of the intensity or the pressure or the mental frustration that they're holding around some type of stress that they're experiencing. The other one is crying. Okay, now I talk a lot about crying and the benefits of tears in my book Democratic Parenting, because there's research that supports that crying emotional tears is one of the best ways that we can drain some of these toxic stress hormones from our body. Okay, they found that these stress hormones are in human emotional tears. Although if you cut an onion, this is what they found in this study, if you cut an onion and the tears that come from cutting an onion don't have these stress hormones, it's only the emotional tears that come up that have the hormones in them, therefore indicating that it's our natural way to heal from stress. So we need our science to tell us something that we already know and feel, because most of us feel really great after we have a good cry. Like, haven't you experienced that before, when you're really upset or frustrated and you just have a good cry and then you feel refreshed and rejuvenated and your perspective is maybe a bit more clear, So crying is a great way for us to just heal from stress. And children cry naturally, right? When they're stressed or feeling pressure, they'll naturally tend to cry in order to self-heal. Okay, this is a natural response, especially for babies. Unfortunately, in our society, we tend to try to distract children from crying. So we often try to hush them, which actually is one of the worst things we can do, because it causes the child to suppress those feelings and keep those stress hormones in their body, rather than just draining them and releasing them, so that they can return to a place of connection and clear thinking with their environment and the people around them. So I highly encourage parents, when they've recognized that their child is dealing with childhood stress disorder, or they're showing some of these symptoms that they've experienced some of these types of stress and that might be holding them back, is to support and encourage the child to have some really good cries. And if a child's quite stressed, it's going to take more than one big cry. It might take several. And, some children won't cry, and that's okay too, right? We can't force people to cry. We don't want to make people cry. But if the child naturally goes there, if they naturally just start to cry, and you can tell that they're wound up and they're stressed and maybe upset, or they've had a really busy day and they're just overwhelmed, is to just let them have a good cry, right? Help them create a safe environment, give them a lot of full loving attention while they cry. I don't recommend you leave them in their room to cry alone. It's best for children if you're there when they're crying and giving them the full attention and letting them know that you're listening to them and that you're there. That really goes a long way to support them and to meet multiple needs of theirs, and to help kind of create this emotional safety cocoon around them, giving them additional encouragement to just let it all out, to let it all go, and to come back to a place of connection and back on track and away from the disorder. Okay, so crying is extremely beneficial and a very powerful way to heal from stress. Next, we have symbolic play. And this is a type of play that children, again, do quite naturally. And we can often see children do this when they play house, or they play with dolls, or they role play with each other, and one might be mommy and one might be daddy. And we can hear them sometimes say things that they hear us say. And sometimes we can be quite revealing to ourselves how they mimic us and what they're actually saying. So it's a great thing to encourage children to do symbolic play, because it helps them just process experience, particularly if they encountered something that had a lot of emotional tension around the experience, or they saw something that confused them, to give them an opportunity to just kind of work it out through their own play can be incredibly healing. There's even a lot of therapists that use this type of thing in their therapy. It's often called play therapy, and there's lots of different types of play therapy. But this can be a great way to really help children open up as well. Now, in my book, Democratic Parenting, there's an entire chapter on a method called self-directed play. And this chapter focuses on how to really set up the environment and create the space and to help a child do what's called self-directed play, where they will engage in a lot of this type of symbolic play, helping them process experience and really process the information and knowledge as well that they get on a daily basis. Next, we have laughing, right? Laughing, one of my favorite quotes about laughing is that laughter is the shortest distance between two people. And as we talked about, disconnection is one of the greatest sources of stress, particularly for children, but really for anyone. And so laughter immediately creates a bond of connection. And also, it has a great benefit in just releasing tension in the body. A great belly laugh will make anybody feel really good and put them right back on track. And we've all heard the saying that laughter is the best medicine. So, there's a chapter also in my book called Natural Giggles. It's one of the chapters near the beginning of the book because it's such an important and easy to use method to help reduce the stress, the tension around specific subjects or interactions with your child, or power struggles, to just kind of reduce the intensity around that by using natural giggles and using the tool of laughter to reduce the pressure, the tension, and to reconnect with your child. Next, we have sleeping, right? A very obvious way that our body rejuvenates and de-stresses, right? We all need to sleep. And appropriate amount of sleep is really important for children. Oftentimes parents will come into my clinic, or they'll contact me and we'll do some private coaching together, and we'll talk about the sleep. And when we talk about the sleep, I realize that the child is not getting enough sleep, and that might be one of the big causes of a lot of their difficult behavior, particularly around difficulty paying attention or energy or engagement, that type of thing. So there's a chapter also in my book called Smart Sleep, which helps to go deeper into that. But sleeping, again, is just a natural, easy way for us to just heal from stress. Sweating, okay, sweating. Just sweating, a lot of the hormones are released through the pores in our body when we sweat. So it's a powerful way for us to cleanse and heal. That's why exercise and sports can be so healing and really to help put us back on track. Earlier when I asked the question, what do you do to heal and to cope with stress in your life? So many times parents will say that they do some type of exercise or sport, they go running or anything like that. And we feel better, again, because these stress hormones are released through our sweat. And that's how it was meant to be, because with the fight or flight response, when we're battling the saber-toothed tiger, or whether we're running from the saber-toothed tiger, we're going to sweat while we're doing that. So that would actually allow all these hormones to actually leave the body through doing this intense physical exercise. And therefore, the stress wouldn't accumulate either. And that takes us into the next one way to heal from stress is exercise and muscle release. Okay, and so we hold tension in our muscles, and that's why people will often experience tension or stress-related headaches, because the neck muscles or different tissues in the body will start to tense up and tighten the more stressed we feel. So releasing these muscles, whether it's through exercise, by just strengthening them and releasing them, which will cause the tissues to relax and let go eventually, or whether it's through sleeping, okay, that's a way that muscles get released. Massage therapy, stretching, yoga, meditation, any types of these physical ways to release the tense muscles helps to reduce stress and to heal from stress. Okay. Finally, getting sick is a great natural way that our body will heal from stress. Now, I have a little asterisk here because, of course, we want to make sure that we don't have a deeper, more serious problem when we get sick that we need medical attention for, and that, because sometimes it's not always stress. But if we're sure that, if we can also see that perhaps we were really stressed for a while, and then we get a cold or get sick, we're in bed with a fever, that might just be a way of our body healing from all the accumulated stress hormones and releasing them. Because by getting sick, by getting feverish, we often will sweat where the hormones get released. There's often a lot of mucus as well, where all the toxicity gets released as well. So, and children get sick a lot as they grow, not only because they get a lot of bugs as their immune system is getting used to all the different bacteria in their environment, but oftentimes as they experience stress from growth and life, they'll get sick and they'll need to recover from stress that way. So these are the 8 ways to heal from stress. And I do go deeper into these in my book, Democratic Parenting, if you want more information or more details about how to use these 8 ways. And a lot of the book, actually the different methods in there, use these 8 ways as kind of a backdrop, like I talked about for the natural giggles method associated with the benefits of laughing. The self-directed play method is associated with the benefits of symbolic play. A lot of the chapter in the book called Connected Communication helps to create an environment of communication where the child will be more willing and able to talk about their issues and heal from that. Okay. So now let's talk about the natural healing strategies versus pharmaceutical medication. Okay. So the consequences for medicating children. Now, the reason I'm touching on this is because like we talked about, so often children are diagnosed with attention deficit disorder or autism spectrum disorder or anxiety disorder, and the doctors or psychiatrists or shrinks will give them medication, pharmaceutical medication, as a way to help them cope and to come back to the present and to a place of connection. Okay. Now, the reason why I want to talk about this is because so often it's just stress that is the cause of it. So if we can help the child heal from stress using these 8 ways, then oftentimes we can avoid going the medication route. And it's important to also look at the negative consequences of medicating our children, because so often this is not properly communicated to adults and parents by the doctors or the people who prescribe and promote this medication. The first and most important one is that a lot of these medications, particularly the ADD type medications and most of this psychiatric medication, can have quite deadly side effects. Some of them can be lethal. There are cases of children to their heart stopping or dying from just a regularly prescribed dose of these types of medication. And parents need to be aware of that. Of course, it happens, thank goodness, far less than often, but we all need to be aware of that. Next, we teach children to rely on drugs to cope instead of using creative problem solving and creative thinking, instead of reaching out to their community or developing a deeper sense of self-knowledge where they can learn how to overcome challenges and how to develop a deeper emotional depth to meet the challenges that we all have in life, because we live in a world which is more stressful than it was just even a very short time ago in our recent history, because of how fast things go and how much technology there is and all the pressure and the media exposure that's everywhere. All these things add to the situational stress that we all experience. And so at the same time, we can see that more and more children and even adults are being prescribed these types of medication in order to help them cope with the pressure and the intensity that's in their world. But instead of doing this, we can start to reach out to our community to learn new ways to handle our feelings and to get more creative and to have a higher perspective on our choices in our lives and how we are actually choosing to schedule our weekly lives, or the influences that we're allowing to let into our world, which may be adding to the stress in our lives. Okay? So the other thing is that a lot of these medications are often addictive, particularly the ADD medication, many of which are classified as class 2 medications which is the same level as cocaine. And this is a classification done by the DEA in America. And a lot of these medications, too, that are given to children are sold on the black market to help give people a high as well, because, again, a lot of these are crystal methamphetamine, which are very addictive. And the other important thing to consider is that childhood is the time when children are developing their identity of their self and the world view, how they view the world, how much they trust the world, how much they feel the world is a safe and good place, or how dangerous or threatening the world is. So that's all this perspective is being developed in their childhood. And their self-identity can be affected if they're given a mental or psychological disorder, like a diagnosis of being ADD and that type of thing. Okay, and that label can really affect their self-worth, their identity, and their whether or not they believe they can succeed later in life. Because success in life really, comes a lot more from a person's belief in whether or not they can do it, more so than by their circumstances, right? Because we've all heard all the stories about people who have changed the course of human history through inventions, through revolutions, through research and science, and many of them had to overcome difficult things in lives, and they weren't given a golden spoon, but by believing that they could succeed, they were able to do it. So this belief of themselves comes a lot from their self-identity. So it's an important thing to consider how, if your child if you're allowing your child to be given the label of ADD or autistic and that type of thing, and they may not actually need to have that label, that may be the symptoms and the behaviors that are happening are caused more by the stress that the child has experienced in their recent or long past is affecting them. And if that is the root cause of it, then there might be alternatives for you, like using these 8 ways to heal from stress to overcome these behaviors and bring your child back to a place of connection where they can be present again, and they're not being driven by these hormones or by these unmet needs. Okay, so that's really what we're talking about here. The other thing to consider is that with these medications, there is no long-term research supporting the benefits of these. Okay, if you look into it, you'll see that a lot of these medications are fairly recent, and most of the long-term research shows the problems of addiction, and will actually show that sometimes it didn't help in the long term with the children. And I get emails all the time, and I hear from parents all the time where they try these medications and it didn't work, and then they shifted the diet, and that did work. Other times, of course, a lot of parents say that these medications have helped their children a lot too, help them cope and to focus a lot as well. So again, everyone responds differently to these. And specifically here, it's every parent's choice whether or not they go this direction. But what I want to do is just highlight these negative consequences that, again, sometimes parents don't consider, or that the parents aren't told about by their doctors or teachers who are recommending these types of medications. Now, in my book, there's other methods to help deal with children's stress and to help them come back to a place of connection. This webinar, I talked about the most important ones. If you just use the stuff that I spoke about in this webinar of these 8 ways to heal from stress, and you focus on these 3 causes of difficult behavior, it's the needs, the stress, and the role models. It's just these alone can really help your child reduce the stress and come back to a place of, like I said, clear thinking and good judgment. My book also has other methods as well to deal with other situations or interactions, and all of it kind of focuses around that main the model of the 3 reasons for misbehavior. So you can check that out if you want, or if you already have it. Now, we're coming to the end here of the webinar, and I'm going to go into some questions and answers. If anyone has questions, I'll answer those in a moment. I just wanted to let you know that upcoming we have our 5-week Parent Learning Club Leadership Training Certification Program, which is starting in about 2 weeks. We do this training a few times a year. It's a 5-week training program, but it's ongoing. You can complete it at your own pace. You don't have to complete it all within the 5 weeks. It's completely online. You can do it from anywhere in the world, and it's really for parents who want to go deeper into some of these skills, to learn more about their child, and to create greater change in their family or their home. Or it's for people or teachers who work with parents or who work with children in their schools or are professionals around that. It can really go a long way to increasing your skills on connecting, communicating, and problem solving, specifically around behaviors with children. So if you're interested in that, you can check out the website at www.parentlearningclub.com/leaders.html. So that's /leaders, LEADERS.html, and then you can learn all about it. So if any of you have any questions right now, feel free to type them in the chat box, and I'll answer them as best as I'm able to. Okay, so Linda asks, how do you explain trauma without post-traumatic stress disorder? A continual trauma without rest? Instead of saying my child has PTSD, would you say my child has childhood stress disorder and bipolar? Good question, Linda. Well, first off, on one hand, I hate using these disorders and type of thing. The reason that I've identified it here is to kind of provide people with an alternative to seeking medication and external help for disorders. And it's really just to acknowledge the fact that sometimes we do go off track, and our children do get off track in their behavior. They do get out of order, right? A disorder. And there are ways that we can naturally heal that. So, so trauma without post-traumatic stress disorder. Well, as I explained, yeah, like I would say it's more childhood stress disorder you're talking about when a child exhibits PTSD symptoms without actually having PTSD. You could say it's childhood stress disorder, but it's very much similar, right? The PTSD and childhood stress disorders are very similar. We're talking about stress. We're talking about trauma. Now, the difference is that childhood stress disorder may not actually go to the level of having experienced trauma. It could just be severe or sustained stress that is causing these behaviors to come up. Okay, where trauma, as I went through the definition earlier before, it had to do with experiencing, witnessing, threatened death or threatened to integrity of self, and having a response that involved intense fear or horror, those types of things. And that gives us the official definition of a traumatic experience. But these symptoms of childhood stress disorder don't have to follow that specific definition. And like I said, they can be caused by one of those four or a combination of those four types of stress: aggressive stress, passive stress, situational stress, or birth stress. Okay? So I hope that answers your question, Linda. Yeah, right. So that's right, Linda. You said that PTSD is described as a one-time trauma, but not continual. Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. But at the same time, like, oftentimes people that go in war are diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, and that can be an accumulation of a variety of traumas that they experience for how many different battles they were in or different situations, right? It can be multiple traumas as well. Okay, now Ellie asks, how to help my 12-year-old daughter to heal from so much trauma that we had in our family? Great question, Ellie. Well, the first thing to do, I would do, is focus on these 8 ways to heal from stress and trauma, okay? So to encourage her to talk, now if she's already talking and open to talking with you or someone in your family, to just encourage that as much as possible. If not, then you can always try, if she's open to it, is developing a relationship with a trained therapist with whom she might be able to talk with. And, oftentimes a 12-year-old girl will feel quite shy around that, depending upon her personality, maybe not. But she might be resistant to that at first. But if you can find someone who's really great, who you connect with, and who she kind of, her first, and just bring her there to have a meeting with this person. And if her initial reaction is, well, this person might, didn't seem too bad, then that's a good sign that they might be able to form a relationship. Now, of course, these types of therapeutic relationships, especially with children, take a while to build for that trust to happen and for the child to feel more and more comfortable to open up and to start talking more and more to a point where the talk becomes more healing. So that type of thing is an ongoing, continual, but yet effective way to help children. And of course, there's the 7 other ways to heal from stress, like crying and laughing, exercise, sweating, those types of things. So you could engage her in maybe some, encourage her to do more exercise, that type of thing. Something especially that helps her, get cardiovascular exercise as well, so she gets into the sweating as well. And, also just be there and to support her if the tears come up as well. Okay. So I hope that helps, Ellie. My son has 10. He's still bedwetting. What do you suggest? Well, so Ellie, you said that you had a lot of stress in your family before, so it could definitely be he's still bedwetting due to stress. And I see that very often where children will bedwet quite a while because the stress is still kind of there in their bodies, and then at night when their bodies, the more the subconscious is working, then it releases, and and they can wet their beds. So there's a couple of things. Obviously, the straightforward ones, you want to make sure that he has a pee before bed. Make sure he doesn't drink too much water in the evening, right? Because that's one thing. But a big thing around that, the emotional component, is again to use these different 8 ways to heal from stress. Crying is by far the most effective way. So if he does have a tendency to cry, then if those tears do come up, or if he throws a tantrum or something, if that comes up, instead of distracting him from those tears or that tantrum and trying to bring him back to composure, instead of doing that, is to just listen to them and allow him to just work through those feelings to completion, to let that flow and drain to completion. And those can be really intense, those experiences where we listen to a child fully have a big tantrum or have a big cry. And if a child has had childhood stress disorder and gone through, held on to stress for a while, they can cry or rage for a good hour or more. And so the best way that we can help a child through that is to really give them our full loving attention the whole time, so that if they're crying and raging and they look up at us, which they will during this, if you do this properly, they'll look up to see if you're still there, if you're still engaged, you're still listening. And if you're not, it's going to immediately cause them to stop the healing, to restrain the release. But if you are giving them the full love and attention, they're going to keep going and drain those feelings more and more. And as difficult as that is for us as adults to do, to really listen to them and give them our full attention through this, the rewards and the benefits that can come from this are really worth it, because you will see that your child will be completely different after a huge drain. Now, if you've experienced a lot of stress for years, it may take more than one big cry, right? You might have to listen to them have an hour-long cry a few times a week for a few weeks until they fully let it all go. But if you can do that, then you will see a completely new child at the end of that. And you will likely see, I would say, there's a good 80% chance that you'll see this bedwetting stop as well. Of course, that's if the root cause is really the stress. The bedwetting can be caused by other things, but I'm assuming here in this case that it is caused by the stress that you've experienced in your family. So by helping your child through that, you'll likely see a shift in that. Okay, John asks, how about energy meridian work such as EFT? Okay, yeah, so EFT is a type of energy meridian healing work, therapy, and of course those can be great to release stress. Now, specifically, those help to release stress through muscular and tissue release. As we spoke about earlier, oftentimes stress and feelings are stored in tissues and muscles. So these types of therapies, what they do is they help these tissues and muscles relax and to release the hold of stress, which in and of itself can help to affect the hormonal system in the body, all the membranes, and the glands. That's the word I was looking for. The glands in the body that are releasing the hormones are affected through these types of therapy. So they can definitely be quite effective to help people heal from stress, and or sometimes overcome a bit of a block to lead them into an ability to heal from stress. Because sometimes, if stress has been going on for so long, or trauma, we kind of develop a bit of a shell, and we don't want to face it. We don't want to look at it. And even when we find ourselves being led there, or something happens and it reminds us of those strong and intense feelings that we've been kind of suppressing for so long, the tendency is to move away from that, because we know that that we have to. Those feelings are not pleasant, but facing those feelings is the way to healing, right? Is the way to releasing them. If we don't face them, if we just deny them, then we just suppress them and we repress them deeper down. And all repression will seek expression. The expression in this case is the negative behaviors, right, that will happen because of suppressing these intense feelings. Instead, we want to look at these feelings, face them, and then release them. So these types of energetical, meridian, or touch therapies can be quite effective. Sometimes just to encourage the body to just relax, to encourage the person to just to stop holding on, to stop running away, and to just face these things head on. You're welcome, John. Thank you. Linda, she asked, how would you handle a situation where a parent or parents that are unrepaired childhood stress disorder, and they have a child dealing with childhood stress also? Okay, so I think what you mean, like if a parent or the parents are had experienced childhood stress disorder in their childhood, and their child has experienced it also. Well, most often than not, that's exactly what is happening. And, because a lot of us, especially in our generation, grew up with more authoritarian type of parenting. And so the authoritarian type of parenting can really come with a lot of the aggressive stress, and also the passive stress, because the needs are not always considered that important, well, at least some of them, right? And they can go unmet. And if the child then acts out in response to that, then they're threatened or they're punished as a consequence, which can lead to the accumulation of aggressive stress. So this is the crux of the whole situation, because when our child starts to have intense feelings, which is what's happening when they start to misbehave, they're expressing their intense feelings. Like if a child starts to hit or kick or flip out, or is exhibiting difficulties at school, it's really their way of reaching out to us and saying, Mommy, Daddy, I'm having a really hard time right now. And our opportunity lies in just kneeling down, looking them in the eyes, touching them affectionately on the shoulder, to make that connection full, and to say, well, sweetie, I'm listening. What is it? Tell me about it. And that approach is what we really want to embody in all aspects. We can't, our child doesn't tell us that outright. They don't say often, they don't communicate to us like that. But the more we use these democratic parenting methods and use the connective communication, the more we encourage the environment where they will eventually be able to communicate with us in that way, especially as they grow into teens and stuff, as they develop these communicative capacities, and their needs are being met in such a way that they're able to think clearly enough to express this verbally to us. We'll start to experience that with our kids. But in the meantime, when they kick us or they do something that's really inappropriate, we have to remind ourselves, okay, my child's he's saying he's having a hard time, or she's saying that she's having a hard time and they're stressed, they need some help here. But the problem, the crux, is that intense feelings in a child will bring up intense feelings in us. And if we haven't healed our own stress, if we haven't dealt with that, then all that stuff is going to bubble to the surface, right? That's why so many parents have a hard time listening to children cry or listening to a child rage or throw a tantrum. They have a really hard time with that because that brings up these really intense feelings for them that they haven't dealt with, okay? So the more that you can take care of yourself, and you know, that the chapter in my book called Adult Listening Time is a great method for you to practice with someone in your life, another adult, who will just give you that full, loving, non-judgmental, non-comment, non-advice attention that we all really just need to talk about our feelings, to express, to just heal our own stress, right? To cry, whatever we need to do. And the method, the adult listening time method, where we have the listener just giving us full attention. They don't give us advice. They don't give us feedback. They just listen to us. And if we just want to talk, we just talk. If we need to cry, we cry. If we need to laugh, we laugh, right? But it's such a great way to help us heal. But any way that you can do, anything that you can do to heal and to rejuvenate and to give yourself a fresh perspective, to reduce the intensity in your own being, to help heal and repair your own childhood stress from your own experience or your adult stress disorder that we can sometimes accumulate just by living in this very busy day and age, or by taking on too much, or by just interacting with certain people. So, you know, I personally do a lot of meditation and qigong and yoga, and I make a point of connecting with friends so that I can get that emotional connection and laugh, you know, and cry as well. And we need time. We need to take this me time away from our kids and away from our family to fill our own emotional reserves, right? To fill our own emotional gas tank. Because the only way that we can give attention and that emotional energy to our child with the full attention and this patience is if we give that to ourselves first. So just you have to give that to yourself first, and then you'll be able to give that to your child. So that's my response to that question, Linda. But that's a great question because we do need to deal with our own unresolved past. And in the 5-week online certification program for the parent leadership, we actually go into that. One of the modules, we go into your own upbringing, and we kind of dig in there to see what kind of monsters might be lurking and hiding in the closets that we can let out and have a party with, and then let them out the door. So and that will allow us to come to our children and our family from a place of presence and clarity rather than reactivity. Okay. Oh, okay. Okay. John asks, can you mention you meant the need for creating sensory adaptable environments such as proper tactile, visual, audio, proprioception, etc. Okay, so so John just asked about creating an environment that is conducive to a child's like a nurturing environment for children. So I do talk about this in my book Democratic Parenting in the chapter on self-directed play, where you know, I talk about how to set up an environment for a child really to get the most out of this type of self-directed play, where they're not overwhelmed by sensory stimulation. And that's a really big one, especially with young children, toddlers, right? So often toddlers are spoiled by their parents and by their grandparents, and they're given just this overabundance of plastic, bright-colored, noisy, electronic moving toys, and they have these things everywhere, stimulating their attention on all levels all the time. And this can drive a kid crazy. And there's no wonder then that these children have a hard time paying attention and being calm, because there's so much stimulation in their physical environment. So reducing that stimulation in their physical environment, reducing the clutter in their physical environment, and creating an environment that is more conducive to inspiring their creativity and inspiring them to take the lead in their play. So in that chapter on self-directed play, I talk about two types of toys. We have like dynamic toys and static toys. Dynamic toys are the types of toys that that we need to use our own imagination to use. For example, a stick, a scarf, a ball, even just a cardboard box, right? These are really great dynamic types of toys, and they're really cheap too. They don't cost very much, where the child can use them with lots of different ways. A kindergarten teacher once told me that she counted 11 different ways that the children used a stick in their play one day. She had the stick there and it had some notches on it from sawing it, and the kids just started playing with this, and throughout the day it was used in 11 different ways. So we can just see how much learning happens for these children when they use this type of dynamic toys to play. And then we have static toys. So static toys are the types of toys that just have a single use, like a car toy or something, right? So a car toy is a car toy, and it's meant to be a car. It can't really be used by many other things. Of course, children will use it as other things, using their imagination, but it inspires less imagination because it's a very static object. And the same thing goes for like entertainment or interaction, where we have passive entertainment like television, video games, where we're not actively doing things and we're being more passively entertained. And then there's more active type of entertainment where we are acting and we're taking the lead. And so we can see the more active type really helps to prepare children, give them the skills to be more dynamic and more engaging in life as well. And because the passive type of entertainment like TV and these types of things really sets the stage for a more kind of entitlement attitude and approach that so many parents complain to me about today, is the sense of entitlement that these kids have. But it's no surprise that these kids should feel entitled when we look at the environment that the parents have set up for them, where they get entertained by the TV or by video games, and they get given things when they whine, or when they make a fuss about things, and they're given just an overabundance of toys, and they have everything they can possibly want, and oftentimes, even though they might have all these toys and all these things, they only play with just a handful of them, and and they're not even they lose gratitude and appreciation for these things because there's so much of them. So I definitely encourage parents to minimize the amount of stimulation and things and clutter in their external environment. That can go a long way in reducing stress in their environment, because there is something that happens when a child in the morning goes into their playroom and there's hundreds of toys in their visual field for them to choose from. There is a type of stress that happens where the child starts to think, what am I going to, what do I choose? What do I play with? Where do I go? Right? It's overwhelming, and it can be confusing for them. So, this is, sometimes it's very like a subconscious level of stress, but it happens. And it's the same thing for us as adults when we go into a messy place, or, if we go onto the road and just traffic everywhere and traffic's moving very fast, there's just a lot of visual stimulation. Or if we go into work and things are really intense that day and people are moving fast, or we're on a tight deadline, everyone's rushing, these types of things affect us in our environment and they increase the level of stress. So by reducing this, it can go a really a long way in reducing a child's overall stress by creating a calmer, almost a more zen environment with less things. They only need really a half a dozen toys that they can choose from, on any daily basis. They don't really need that much to entertain themselves with or to learn from. Okay. Linda says, thanks so much for your knowledge and these webinars. Oh, thank you, Linda. It's a real pleasure for me to share this with you and to be on and to answer these great questions. And then how often do you start the leadership training? So we do the leadership training. It's an ongoing thing. You can do it. You can join anytime. However, we probably do it 4 times a year, where we have the 5-week sessions where I will do a live webinar to support each module every week. But you can join anytime, and you actually get access to the recordings of the previous webinars, and you can also attend future leadership webinars ongoing forever as soon as you join the leadership training. So, okay. Another question, John says, wonderful answer, thank you. We know that screen time is holding our kids captive these days, and with only video or audio, their nervous systems can't integrate well with the absence of proprioception, large muscle movements, and vestibular movement. Okay. Yeah, no, it's true that screen time, the amount of screen time that children have, and whether it's the large screens and TVs or like these massive flat screens that people have in their homes, or whether it's these small screens with tablets or these smartphones that have all these games on that the children just seem to so intuitively grab and play with and move. All these things, they do hold our children captive, and you're right, it does kind of affect their fine motor development, their nervous systems, their proprioceptions. It affects their eyesight as well if they're staring too long at a two-dimensional object at the same distance with light emanating from it, with a lot of screen changes, screen changes like for shows or videos or movies. Sometimes it will shift from one screen to not screen changes, but what's the word where it goes from one scene to another, I guess scene changes in the show or movie. They found over the years that these changes in the scenes happen quicker and quicker, and the reason for that is that people, as their attention needs to be kept longer and longer, because television is becoming less and less interesting for us as people, because we've seen so much of it that it's not holding our attention as much as it used to. So they're increasing the intensity and the brightness and the colors and the clarity of the screens, and they're increasing the speed at which the different scenes move in the shows to keep our attention there. And yeah, it does affect us on many different levels, and it definitely affects a child's brain development as well, and their attention and ability to learn as well. There's been studies done where they found that they tested children who watched TV at night before their class after learning something. So they learned something in school, then they watched television, and the next day they would get tested on what they learned the day before. And without fail, all the ones who watched television in the night before they were tested performed lower than the other ones who didn't watch television. So that's something for us to really look at. And I see it myself in my own children, or any children, when they watch a movie or TV, their minds, their whole are kind of caught up in the stories that they might have just experienced, and they have a hard time kind of bringing their minds back to something they learned or something else you taught them before sometimes. So definitely, I definitely encourage us. I have a whole chapter in my book as well called "Turn Off the TV," because there's so much more to life than televisions and screens, and with so much technological advancement these days, our children will go much further if we kind of shield them from that exposure as long as possible. Because frankly, when they become adults, they're going to have their whole rest of their adult life to experience and to explore screen time and electronic media. So let them do that at that point. But in their early stages, my approach is to really help them get deeper into their bodies and deeper into their own ability to be creative and to engage people and to learn communication skills, these deep kind of human body skills that will carry them forward and help them no matter where they go and no matter what interests them in the future. Okay, well, thank you everybody for these great questions. It's been a real pleasure to answer them and to engage with you on this webinar and to share all this information about childhood stress disorder. And like I said, if you're interested in our training, leadership training program, you can go to our website at parentlearningclub.com/leaders.html. And I think we'll be doing our next webinar won't be probably till next month in March. We're planning a webinar on defiance, how to encourage cooperation with children using connective communication, how to overcome defiance and that type of thing. But we haven't secured a date yet, so just be sure to watch your emails for that. Again, thank you so much. And remember, every single day of your life, give all your love to your children and give all your love to you too. Give back that same level of love and dedication to yourself so you can fill your own emotional reserve and you'll be more present, for your own children and your own family. And together, we can build a brighter future. Thank you.